Srila A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada ki jai. Jayam Vishnu Pad Paramahamsa Parivrajagacharya Astotara Satta Shri Srimad. His Divine Grace Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Goswami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Anantakoti Vaishnava Vrinda ki jai. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ki jai. Prem Sikaho Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vas Adi Gaura Bhakta Vrind ki jai. Shri Shri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopi Nath Shamakund Radha Kund Giri Govardhan ki jai. Vrindavan Dham ki jai. Mayapur Navadvip Dham ki jai. Ganga Mai Yamun Mai ki jai. Bhakti Devi Tulsi Maharani ki jai. Samaveda Bhakta Vrinda ki jai. Gaura Premanandi Hari Hari Bol. All glories to the assembled devotees. All glories to the assembled devotees.
Hare Krishna.
All glories to the assembled devotees.
Hare
All glories to the lotus feet of Sri Sri Guru and Sri Gauranga. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate
Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Hare Krishna. Good morning, everyone. Today is the auspicious appearance day of Sri Vamana Dev, and it's also the appearance day of Srila Jiva Goswami. So today we're mainly going to speak about Lord Vamana, and at the end we'll also speak a little about Srila Jiva Goswami. So the verse we picked for today to discuss Lord Vamana Dev's pastimes. So we'll chant this verse from Srimad Bhagavatam, 2nd canto, 7th chapter, verse 17. It's a list of the scheduled incarnations of the Lord. So we just get a overall glimpse of the pastime. But then we'll also go through the chapter summaries of the 8th canto, several chapters that describe this pastime, the events leading up to it, all the different results, all the different lessons that we can learn from the various aspects of this pastime of Lord Vamana Dev coming. So first we'll do this verse here, 2:7-17. Jayan Gunair Avarajo Yadite Sutanang Lokan Vichakrama Iman Yadatadhi Yajna Shmam Vamanena Jagrihe Tripadach Chalena Yachnyam Rite Paticharan Prabhubhir Nachalyaha Jayan Gunair Avarajopyadite Sutanam Lokan Vichakrama Iman Yad Atadhi Yajnyaha Shmam Vamanena Jagri Tripat Shmam Vamanena Jagrihe Tripadach Chalena Yachnyam Rite Paticharan Prabhubhir Nachalyaha Jayan Gunar Avarad Ajopyadite Sutanam Lokan Vichakrama Iman Yad Atadhi Yajnyaha Shmam Vamanena Jagrihe Tripadach Chalena Yachnyam Rite Paticharan Prabhubhir Nachalyaha. Okay, please chant.
Jyayan Guner Avarajopi Adite Sutanam Lokan Vichakrama Iman Yadatadhi Yagna क्षमां वामनेन जगृ त्रिपदच्छलेन याचनामृते पतिचरन् प्रभुभिर्न चाल्यः।
ज्यायान् गुणैरवरजोऽपि अदिते सुतानां लोकान् विचक्रम इमान् यदथाद्य जज्ञा क्षमां वामनेन जगृहे त्रिपदच्चलेन याचनामृते पतिचरन् प्रभुभिर्न चाल्या।
ज्यायान् गुणैरवरजोऽपि अदितिस्तानां लोकान् विचक्रमैमान् यदथादियज्ञाः क्षमान् वामनेन जगृहे त्रिपदाच्चलेन याज्ञामृते पतिचरन् प्रभुभिर्न चल्य। हरे कृष्ण।
हरे कृष्ण। जयान गुणैरवरजोऽपि अदितेः सुतानां लोकान् चिक्रमा इमां यजतादियज्ञा क्षमामह्वामनेन जगृह्य त्रिपदचलेन यज्ञामृते पतिचरन् प्रभुभिर्न चाल्यः। हरे कृष्ण।
Anyone else? Okay. Jayan, the greatest. Gunai, by qualities. Avarajaha, transcendental. Api, although he is so. Aditehe, of Aditi. Sutanam, of all the sons known as Adityas. Lokan, all the planets. Vichakrame, surpassed. Iman, in the universe. Yat, one who. Atha, therefore. Adhiyajnaha, the supreme personality of Godhead. Shmam, all the lands. Vamanena, in the incarnation of Vamana. Jagrihe, accepted. Tripada, 3 steps. Chalena, by presentation. Yachnyam, begging. Rite, without. Pati charan, passing over the right path. Prabhubihi, by authorities. Na, never to be. Chalyaha, to be bereft of. Translation by Sri Prabhupada. The Lord, although transcendental to all material modes, still surpassed all the qualities of the sons of Aditi, known as the Adityas. The Lord appeared as the youngest son of Aditi. And because he surpassed all the planets of the universe, he is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. On the pretense of asking for a measurement of 3 footsteps of land, he took away all the lands of Bali Maharaj. He asked simply because, without begging, no authority can take one's rightful possession. Purport by Srila Prabhupada. The history of Bali Maharaj and his charity to Vamana Dev is described in the 8th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam. Bali Maharaj conquered all the planets of the universe by rightful possession. A king can conquer other kings by strength, and such possession is considered to be rightful. So, Bali Maharaj possessed all the lands of the universe. and he happened to be charitably disposed toward the Brahmanas. The Lord therefore pretended to be a beggar Brahmana, and he asked Bali Maharaj for a measurement of 3 footsteps of land. The Lord, as the proprietor of everything, could take from Bali Maharaj all the land he possessed, but he did not do so because Bali Maharaj possessed all those lands by king's rights. When Bali Maharaj was asked by Lord Vamana for such small charity, Bali Maharaj's spiritual master, namely Shukracharya, objected to this proposal because he knew that Vamanadev was Vishnu himself pretending to be a beggar. Bali Maharaj did not agree to abide by the order of his spiritual master when he understood that the beggar was Vishnu himself, and he at once agreed to give him in charity the land requested. By this agreement, Lord Vamana covered all the lands of the universe with his first 2 steps, and then asked Bali Maharaj where to place the 3rd step. Bali Maharaj was very glad to receive the Lord's remaining step upon his head, and thus Bali Maharaj, instead of losing everything he possessed, was blessed by the Lord's becoming his constant companion and doorman. So, by giving everything to the cause of the Lord, one does not lose anything, but he gains everything that he could never otherwise expect. Translation again. The Lord, although transcendental to all material modes, still surpassed all the qualities of the sons of Aditi, known as the Adityas. The Lord appeared as the youngest son of Aditi, and because he surpassed all the planets of the universe, he is the supreme personality of Godhead. On the pretense of asking for a measurement of 3 footsteps of land, he took away the lands of Bali Maharaj. He asked simply because without begging, no authority can take one's rightful possession. Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swamine Tanamane Namaste Sarasvate Devi Gauravana Pacharne Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pashachade Shatare Om Jnana Timirandasya Jnana Jnana Salakala Chakshur Unmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Vanchakalpatrubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Eva Chapanitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Hare Krishna. So here's just like I said, this is the summary of the pastime. We're going to go into the details of it. But before we do that, there are a few things in this purport that I wanted to bring out before we get to those points in the pastime, since Srila Prabhupada brought those out in this purport. So the first thing is that when Bali Maharaj gained control of everything, including Indra's kingdom, the whole universe, he did so fairly. He was the rightful owner. Prior to this incident, the demigods and the demons had to come together to cooperate to churn the milk ocean and to make nectar. So they extracted all these different wonderful things came out from the churning of the ocean, and it was a collaboration, a cooperation between the demigods and the demons. And this is because the Supreme Lord wanted this to happen. But after this happened, there was an incident where the demigods were seemingly favored by the Supreme Lord, and the demons, it seemed to them that they were unfairly treated, right? So they started a fight. They weren't allowed to have the nectar. Mohini Murti, Lord Krishna came as this dazzling form that just bewildered everyone, and in a sense cheated the demons out of their share of the bounty that came from the churning of this ocean. And so they felt slighted, right? So they started a fight. And actually, at one point, the demons were winning the fight. They were using these powerful illusions that were bewildering the demigods, and the demigods were losing the fight. So the demigods, as they are meant to, they turn to Lord Vishnu for help. So this is the difference between the devatas, the demigods, and the demons. And it's a tendency. It's not 100% always what happens, which we'll find to know. But the tendency of the demigods is that whenever there's trouble, they will always depend on the Supreme Lord. And the tendency of the demons is that they tend to not care so much about Lord Vishnu or his position. They just want to acquire and enjoy. So both of these parties, the demigods and the demons, are quite powerful. But sometimes the demons actually follow Vedic culture, Brahminical culture, better than the demigods, and so they become more powerful. So this is one of these cases where after that fight took place, after the churning of the ocean of milk, and the demons felt that they were treated unfairly, they started worshiping their guru and properly following his instructions. And in doing so, in following Brahminical culture and performing a special sacrifice, they became very powerful, even more powerful than the demigods. So when the demigods saw that the demons were becoming so powerful, they went to their spiritual master and they said, what should we do? The demons have become quite powerful. It seems that we can't conquer them at this point. So please instruct us what to do. So the guru of the demigods told him, well, actually, yes, now because they were following Brahminical culture more strictly, they are more powerful than you. So my best advice to you is to go into hiding, and you have to wait until you regain the favor of Lord Vishnu. And so they did. They went into hiding. And so when this is described here, Srila Prabhupada is saying that the demons actually became the rightful owners. They didn't do it in unfair means. They were able to take over everything because they followed properly Brahminical culture, the culture that is set forth by Lord Vishnu himself. So, as it's stated at the end of this verse, without begging, no authority can take one's rightful possession. Right? So when the Lord came to get the universe, the three worlds, when he came and get this back and put it back into the possession of the demigods, he had to follow some particular rules, right? He could have taken everything by force, but that's not how things work, right? So he did so. He knew that the reason the demons became powerful is because they were following Brahminical culture. So the Lord knew that they were going to continue to follow Brahminical culture, and so he came as a Brahmana and asked for a very small donation, right? And this is how culture works. So we will let's start. I have to move this bar here somehow. Okay, there it goes. So we're going to read some of these chapter summaries just to get the full picture, and then I'll say a few things on a few of these points as they come up. So the first chapter summary we'll read is chapter 15. This is the 8th canto. So this chapter describes how Bali, after performing the Vishvajit Yajna, received the benediction of a chariot and various kinds of paraphernalia for war, with which he attacked the king of heaven. All the demigods, being afraid of him, left the heavenly planets and went away, following the instructions of their guru. Maharaj Parikshit wanted to understand how Lord Vamanadev, on the plea of taking 3 paces of land from Bali Maharaj, took everything away from him and arrested him. Shukadev Goswami responded to this inquiry with the following explanation. In the fight between the demons and the demigods, as described in the 11th chapter of this canto, Bali was defeated and he died in the field. But by the grace of Shukracharya, he regained his life. Thus, he engaged himself in the service of Shukracharya, his spiritual master. The descendants of Brigu, being pleased with him, engaged him in this Vishvajit Yajna. When this yajna was performed, from the fire of yajna came a chariot, horses, a flag, a bow, armor, and 2 quivers of arrows. Maharaj Prahlad, Bali Maharaj's grandfather, gave Bali an eternal garland of flowers, and Shukracharya gave him a conch shell. Bali Maharaj, after offering obeisances to Prahlad, the Brahmanas, and his spiritual master Shukracharya, equipped himself to fight with Indra and went to Indrapuri with his soldiers. Blowing his conch shell, he attacked the outskirts of Indra's kingdom. When Indra saw Bali Maharaj's prowess, he went to his own spiritual master, Brihaspati, told him about Bali's strength, and inquired about his duty. Brihaspati informed the demigods that because Bali had been endowed with extraordinary power by the Brahmanas, the demigods could not fight with him. Their only hope was to gain favor of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Indeed, there was no alternative. Under the circumstances, Brihaspati advised the demigods to leave the heavenly planets and keep themselves somewhere invisible. The demigods followed his order, and Bali Maharaj, along with his associates, gained the entire kingdom of Indra. The descendants of Brigu Muni, being very affectionate to their disciple Bali Maharaj, engaged him in performing 100 Ashvamedha yajnas. In this way, Bali enjoyed the opulences of the heavenly planets. So first, Bali Maharaj was able to, in following the instructions of his guru and in following Brahminical culture, following all of the etiquette, he was able to get the instructions of his guru, which was to perform this specific sacrifice. From that sacrifice, he was able to get all these different things: the chariot, the horses, the bow, the armor, and that was equipped him with everything needed to overthrow Indra from his kingdom. Right. So we should take note that it's not that because he got the chariot and the weapons and that's why he's able to overthrow the demigods. It's because he followed the Brahminical culture, followed properly the advice of the guru, and then because of that, the yajna was successful and he was able to get these things. So the potency is in following the culture, not in these external specific items, as we'll also see later. But then after Bali Maharaj occupied Indra's kingdom, then they also understood that, okay, you're here, but if you want to stay here, then you have to do something more, because you've qualified yourself to get to this point. But if you want to qualify yourself to stay at this point, then you have to do these other additional sacrifices, these Ashvamedha yajnas. So Indra is famous for performing the 100 Ashvamedha yajnas, and sometimes he considers that because he did that, then he's qualified for his position. So if someone else tries to do that, he'll often, we see the story where, who was it? Maharaj Priyavrata, I think, was doing, and on he performed 99, but on the 100th one, Indra kept coming in disguise of different types of sannyasis, and he was stealing the horse that was meant for sacrifice because he was afraid that someone was going to take his kingdom, right? So here, the descendants of Bhrigu Muni are explaining to Bali, okay, you're here now, you've overthrown this kingdom, but if you want to keep the kingdom, then you do like Indra did, you do the 100 horse sacrifices, and then you'll be able to remain here. Okay, so then in the next chapter, chapter 16, executing the Payovrata process of worship. As described in this chapter, because Aditi, the mother of the demigod, was very afflicted, her husband, Kashyapa Muni, told her how to observe vows in austerities for the benefit of her son. Since the demigods were not visible in the heavenly kingdom, so they went into hiding, their mother, Aditi, because of separation from them, was very much aggrieved. One day, after many, many years, the great sage Kashyap emerged from a trance of meditation and returned to his ashram. He saw that the ashram was no longer beautiful and that his wife was very morose. Everywhere in the ashrama, he saw signs of lamentation. The great sage therefore inquired from his wife about the well-being of the ashrama and asked her why she looked so morose. After Aditi informed Kashyapa Muni about the ashrama's well-being, she told him that she was lamenting for the absence of her sons. She then requested him to tell her how her sons could return and reoccupy their positions. So at this point, I'll mention that it's because the demigods they tend to always turn to Lord Vishnu. That's the reason they have their posts, because that's their tendency. Their default setting is whenever there's trouble or difficulty or an obstacle, they will tend to turn to Lord Vishnu. And because of that, they are given these very important posts to make sure that the universe runs nicely and under the guidance of how the Lord wants everything to run. And so that's why it's not that, anyway, so we'll get further into that. So, but as we mentioned before, sometimes the demons will actually follow Brahminical culture better, at least temporarily, than the demigods, and they will take control. So there are several actual instances of this that happened in Srimad Bhagavatam. Does anyone want to chime in and say another time that this happened where the demons or a demon became so powerful that he was able to occupy Indra's kingdom or defeat Indra? Anyone?
Was Hiranyakashipu one of them?
He did, yeah. Hiranyakashipu was able to take over everything. The sun, the moon, yeah, he took over Indra's kingdom as well. Good. Anyone else? Anyone else was able to defeat Indra because they followed Brahminical culture better than Indra did at the time? The pastime of Ritrasur also. So Indra, this is the time when Indra actually wasn't properly following the etiquette towards his spiritual master. So his spiritual master went off, and then Indra and the other demigods needed to find some other guru to perform their sacrifices so that they could get some benefit. So they found this other guru, but he was also favorable to the demons. He was giving shares to the demigods, but he was also giving shares to the demons. So Indra, when he found this out, he decapitated this guru, all three of his heads. And because of this, because the demons were following Brahminical culture better, they were actually listening to the guru, they became more powerful. And because the demigods were not following properly, they lost access to the mercy of their guru. And so it took a demon, Vritrasur, to preach to Lord Indra to get him back into the proper understanding that you cannot defeat me by your own prowess. No one can rely on their own prowess to overcome their enemies. You have to turn to Vishnu. So you pick up that weapon that was specifically made to conquer me. Otherwise, you're not going to be able to do it. So we see that sometimes the demons not only become more powerful, but then are actually able to preach to the demigods who are meant to always be devotees of the Lord. So yeah, there are examples like this. So Aditi, she's lamenting because her sons aren't there in those positions, and the reason is she knows that they tend to. The reason they have these positions is because they tend to turn to Vishnu, and she's not seeing them, and she's lamenting that currently that's not their proper mindset, and so she's hoping to get them back. She's also has motherly affection, so naturally she wants to see her sons. So then continuing, she wanted all good fortune for her sons. Moved by Aditi's request, Kashyapa Muni instructed her in the philosophy of self-realization, the difference between matter and spirit, and how to be unaffected by material law. Satisfied, even after he had given these instructions, he advised her to worship Vasudeva Janardana. So first, Kashyapa Muni, as a great sage, equipoised, he understood that Krishna is in control of everything. So even though the situation seems backwards, that somehow everything would work out. So first he was just preaching to her the difference between spirit and matter, right? But she wasn't satisfied with this. She wanted her sons back, right? So there was a little bit too much attachment there. And so then he said, okay, well, if you insist that, this is your duty to right the world, to bring it back into proper balance, to, bring it back to where it should be, then you have to approach Lord Vishnu, right? And this is advice that we all can use, because sometimes we feel, especially in this age of Kali, we feel that the world is backwards. It's not going the way it's supposed to. Everything's supposed to move according to the will of Krishna. We know that Krishna wants people to act in a certain way, and we see that people aren't acting in that way. So we think that sometimes it's our duty to step in and try to reverse these things, not understanding that actually Krishna is also in charge of these seemingly backward situations because of circumstances that we don't understand. But if we still feel this need to do something about it, right? We see that there's so many wrongs happening in society. If we still feel the need to try to do something to reverse that, then we have to do that in line with Krishna's desires, right? So we have to approach Krishna. So after he tried to explain to her that, look, everything is happening for a reason. If you just focus on, your spiritual life, everything around you won't matter. When she was determined that, no, we have to do something about it, I said, okay. He said, now you approach Vasudeva. So continuing, he assured her that only Lord Vasudeva could satisfy her and fulfill all her desires. When Aditi then expressed her desire to worship Lord Vasudeva, Prajapati Kashyapa told her about the process of worship known as Payovrata, which is executed in 12 days. Lord Brahma had instructed him how to satisfy Lord Krishna by this process, and thus he advised his wife to observe this vow and its regulative principles. So the interesting thing here is that now the same thing is happening. So before the demons got their power, because they felt that they were treated unfairly, and so they wanted to do something about it, right? So they approached their guru, who was a Brahmana who understood how things work according to the Vedas, and their guru gave them a process in which they could become stronger, right? And this is the same thing that's happening. She approaches her husband, who's her guru, And he's telling her, okay, you follow this process, then you do this vrata, and then if you satisfy the Lord, then everything will be fine. So everyone gets their power by satisfying the Lord. And it's always through disciplic succession. It's not through whims, right? It's not through, well, I want to please the Lord, so I'm gonna, and then we come up with some wacky scheme of how we can please the Lord and become powerful. Or, as mentioned before, we saw that the demons, after they did this sacrifice, they were rewarded with these different chariots and weapons. And so if someone doesn't understand the principle of that, and they think, oh, well, as long as we get chariots and weapons and things like that, then we can defeat our enemies, right? Not knowing that the reason they got those chariots and weapons was because they pleased the Supreme Lord by following Brahminical culture. So if we miss out on that principle and we just try to accumulate weapons by other means, by working, by performing karma and getting, building up enough piety to get some weapons, that's not necessarily going to work for us. So the way it works is if the Lord is satisfied. Now, we can satisfy the Lord through karma, but it's better to approach directly into the culture that he has given, Brahminical culture. So we see that Aditi, she also wanted to right an apparent wrong, and so she did it the right way. She approached her spiritual master. She was given a vow that she could follow that was also given in disciplic succession. So Brahma gave it to Kashyapa. Kashyapa passed it down to his wife. She performed it, and then she satisfied the Lord. So the next, oh, I'm probably not going to be able to get as far as there are so many lessons that we can learn in these sections, and I'm just reading through the summaries. Last night I was going through the verses and purports, and there are so many very important lessons that we can learn from this pastime. I'll try to basically hit the highlights, but we're definitely not going to get as far as I hoped. So chapter 17 then, this is when the Lord then agrees to become Aditi's son. So as explained in this chapter, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, being very pleased by the Payovrata ceremony performed by Aditi, appeared before her in full opulence. At her request, the Lord agreed to become her son. After Aditi performed the Payovrata ceremony for 12 continuous days, the Lord, who was certainly very pleased with her, appeared before her with 4 hands and dressed in yellow garments. As soon as Aditi saw the Supreme Personality of Godhead present before her, she immediately got up, and with great ecstatic love for the Lord, she fell to the ground to offer respectful obeisances. I'll pause here to point out that this is actually when we see someone that we revere, the first thing we do is we should leave our seat, stand up, and then we offer obeisances. We'll see this throughout the Srimad Bhagavatam, of great personalities doing this when they see. So even nowadays, we hardly even offer obeisances, unfortunately, when we see a saintly person. At least we do when we go into the temple, so that's nice. But it's also customary, it's in our culture that when our spiritual master or an exalted personality comes before us, that we should rise, we should stand up, and then offer obeisances. And we see remnants of this culture even in different cultures. Like, for example, if you go to a courtroom, when the judge comes in, everybody has to stand, right? And so that's just a remnant of so it's like a reflection of the actual culture. And then also back in the day, I don't think many people do it anymore, but generally when one is eating in a party, if a lady gets up for whatever reason, then all the men will also get out of their seats. They'll rise, and then after she leaves, they sit back down. So it's still practiced where culture is valued, but it's a rare thing. So that's also a remnant of this particular culture. So this is something that we should also learn from and aspire, because leaving our seat shows that that we're giving respect to the person, and then offering obeisances is further respect. So we also see that in the case of Ramaharshana Sutta, where he didn't stand and he had to pay a consequence for that, for not having observed the culture. So continuing, Aditi's throat was choked because of ecstatic feelings, and her entire body trembled with devotion. Although she wanted to offer suitable prayers to the Lord, she could not do anything, and thus she remained silent for some time. Now, this is another thing that often happens. Also happened with Dhruva Maharaj. He performed his vow, and then when the Lord came, all of a sudden he didn't know what to say, because without the inspiration of the Supreme Lord, we can't do anything. So this is a common thing when one gains darshan of the Supreme Lord. Then, feeling solace, observing the beauty of the Lord, she offered her prayers. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, the supersoul of all living entities, was very pleased with her, and he agreed to become her son by incarnating as a plenary expansion. He was already pleased by Kashyapa Muni's austerities, and thus he agreed to become their son and maintain the demigods. I also wanted to point out from the previous chapter, when Kashyapa Muni when he first came out of his meditation, and he saw that his ashram was in disarray and that his wife was morose, the first thing he did, and it's very similar to what Maharaj Yudhishthira did when Arjuna came back and from his trip to visit Krishna, and Maharaj Yudhishthira saw that Arjuna looked very pale and despondent, and so he was asking him various questions about, did you perhaps fail to take care of someone that needed to be taken care of, or did you basically did you do some sort of minor cultural misstep where you didn't follow etiquette, and because of that, like if maybe a guest came and you didn't properly what's the word, it's not accept, I lose words sometimes. It's like accept. What happens when a guest comes and you
receive?
Thank you very much. Did you not properly receive that guest? And is this why so much despondency is there? So in a very similar way, Kashyapa Muni, that same example was also given. Did an unwanted or not an unwanted guest, but an unknown guest come, and you didn't receive them properly? Is this why the ashram is looking like this? So throughout these chapters, we see that there's a direct correlation between following Brahminical culture and prosperity. If we don't follow Brahminical culture, we can't prosper. And if we do follow Brahminical culture, even if we're on the wrong side, if we're demons, if follow Brahminical culture, you can prosper. So following the culture is what makes things prosper. And the reason that's true is because the culture is given by the Supreme Lord himself. So it's his process. So if you're following it, whether you even are doing it for the right reason or not, you're following the Lord's orders. So there's potency there, right? Even if you're doing it for a completely different reason. So sometimes we need to understand this, is sometimes non-devotees can become more powerful than devotees because the devotees aren't following properly the culture that is given by the Supreme Lord. Now that they will vocally support the Supreme Lord, and they will identify as devotees of the Supreme Lord, but if they're not following the culture that he's given, they can actually be less powerful than those who don't appreciate the Supreme Lord, but are at least following the process in order to get this particular potency. So continuing, after giving his word of honor to this effect, the Lord disappeared. Following the order of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Aditi engaged in the service of Kashyapa Muni, who could see by samadhi that the Lord was within him, and who thus placed his semen in the womb of Aditi. Lord Brahma, who is known as Hiranyagarbha, understood that the Supreme Personality of Godhead had entered Aditi's womb. Thus he offered prayers to the Lord. Oh, so this I want to read these. There's two verses and a purport that are in that chapter that are quite important. So this is Lord Vishnu speaking. So after, when he appeared to her in his four-armed form and he was speaking to her, this is Canto 8, Chapter 17, verse 16. O mother of the demigods, so he's talking to Aditi. In my opinion, almost all the chiefs of the demons are now unconquerable, for they are being protected by brahmanas, whom the Supreme Lord always favors. Thus, the use of power against them now will not at all be a source of happiness. Purport. When a person is favored by brahmanas and Vaishnavas, no one can defeat him. Even the Supreme Personality of Godhead does not interfere when one is protected by a brahmana. It is said, go brahmana hitaya cha. The Lord's first inclination is to give all benedictions to the cows and the brahmanas. Therefore, if brahmanas favor someone, the Lord does not interfere, nor can anyone interfere with the happiness of such a person. So not only does the Lord prefer not to interfere, but no one can interfere, because that's how the Lord's laws work, right? If someone's following that culture and they have favor of the brahmanas, not only will the Supreme Lord not intervene, but no one can intervene with that, right? So the Supreme Lord was telling Aditi that you can't do this by power. And then the next verse, he says, yet because I have been satisfied by the activities of your vow, O goddess Aditi, so because you're now also following properly, I must find some means to favor you, for worship of me never goes in vain, but certainly gives the desired result according to what one deserves. Now, the important part of this verse is that last bit, because what we tend to think is as long as we're trying, right, that we should get the result, right? So most people would take off those last few words and they would just hope that God, or Krishna here, is saying, worship of me never goes in vain, but certainly gives the desired result. That's it. That's all we want to hear. But this bit is here, according to what one deserves, right? It's not that just because we want something and we give lip service to the Lord that we're going to get the desired result. No, it's that sure, the desire has to be there and the worship has to be there, but the qualification also has to be there. One has to actually deserve that. So prior to this, the demons deserved to be more powerful because they were following properly, right? And now that she also is following properly, and she's following the instructions of her guru, who gave her a vow in disciplic succession that was given to him by Brahma. Now, because that's what is deserved, now the Lord will come appear in her womb as her youngest son, and he will reverse the situation, right? Because that's what it was, not just because she wanted it, but because she wanted it, she followed that particular vow, and now the demigods again deserve, they've reawakened their qualification and showed, okay, now we're going through Lord Vishnu, we're turning to Lord Vishnu. That's who we're depending on. We're not going to depend on prowess, we're not going to depend on desire or qualification, or wait, this is how it's supposed to be, the demigods are supposed to be in control, that's, the Lord put us in control, so we should be in control. Well, that's true, but you can only be in control if you're actually following what the Lord is giving, right? So that's one of the very important lessons that we are to learn from this section. I'm gonna have to summarize the summaries, I think, because we're really, there are several more chapters and we're really running out of time. Okay, so I'll read. It might be quicker than to think of how to summarize it. So next chapter summary. Lord Vamana Deva appeared in the womb of Aditi, completely equipped with conch shell, disc, club, and lotus. So he appeared in his four-arm form. And then afterwards, then he took the form of the Brahmana dwarf. And then he went to he went to where the descendants of Brigu were, and so he approached Bali and asked him, because he knew he followed Brahminical culture. He asked him, "Okay, will you give 3 steps of land?" And after Bali Maharaj agreed, of course, his spiritual master said, "No, you shouldn't do that, because this is actually Lord Vishnu, and he's trying to cheat you. He's going to take everything from you, right?" But Bali Maharaj, he said, "No, I'm going to give this charity. I promised it. Even if it is Lord Vishnu, I'm going to give." And then Vamana Dev, when he went to take these 3 steps, I'll actually just stop that. Sure. When he went to take these steps, actually, technically, because we hear that he took the 2 steps and it took the whole universe, but he actually took it in 1, because the first step he had to go to the bottom of the universe, right? Just so, because otherwise he'd be starting somewhere in the middle, right? And so, of course, he could have just expanded himself to where his entire foot was covering everything. So he could have done it in no steps. Like, all right, I didn't even take a step. This is just where my 1 foot is. But the way he did it was, okay, first I step down this way, and then I'll step this way. So it's actually just 1 step, but the way it's explained is the 2. And then he needed some place to put his 3rd step. He said, "Well, you promised me 3 steps, and I've only taken 2 so far. So what are you going to do?" So Bali Maharaj said, "Okay, you please place that foot on my head." And because he did that, because he gave himself, the only thing he actually possesses his own self, because he gave that voluntarily to Krishna. Krishna then agreed to become his protector, always. And so, so many lessons that we can learn. But I also wanted to say some things about Srila Jiva Goswami. I recommend that if you have time today, go through, pick one of these chapters and go through some of these verses and purports. There are so many valuable lessons that we can learn from this. But the most important lessons, like I said, are the ones where we have to understand that just because we say we are Vaishnavas, we're aspiring Vaishnavas, and we chant and we aspire to follow the orders of the spiritual master, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're always doing the exact right thing. If we're not referring to Shastra, if we're not referring to the Brahminical culture, we could be veering off the path and not even know it. And when we see that there are problems in the world that we know aren't the way that Krishna would prefer them to happen, and we want to try to sort of make a change, that we shouldn't just do that based on our own prowess or our own ideas of what we think Krishna would want. We actually have to do them in line with disciplic succession. So we have to approach our guru, and then he is going to give us an authorized process by which we can actually do something about what's going on, right? Otherwise, if we just see something that we think is unfair, and then we try to fight it on our own prowess, we try to counteract something that's been done that we think is wrong, it's not gonna benefit anyone. It's not going to benefit us. It's not going to benefit the other people. There may be some temporary change of material power, but in the long run, it's not going to mean a thing. So anytime we want to actually make something happen properly, we always have to approach the Supreme Lord through our spiritual master, and then actually follow that process properly. And that's where the potency is in everything. Those are the most important ones. So then, since it's also Srila Jiva Goswami's appearance day, I wanted to mention a few things about him. So Srila Jiva Goswami, he's the nephew of Srila Rupa Goswami and Srila Sanatan Goswami. Srila Rupa Goswami and Srila Sanatan Goswami had a brother named Anupama, but then he was Vallabha. And he had a son who was then Jiva Goswami. So when Sanatana Goswami was imprisoned, Rupa Goswami was traveling with Jiva Goswami's father. And he's also a great devotee. And so he also got instructions from Lord Chaitanya. And then when Srila Sanatana Goswami was able to get himself out of prison through the savings that Srila Rupa Goswami had put aside, and through this, bribing the prison guard, while the two brothers Rupa and Sanatan were coming to meet one another, their brother Vallabha left his body, and so that's Srila Jiva Goswami's father. So Srila Jiva Goswami wrote many books, compiled many books, very important books for we aspiring Vaishnavas. One of the ones that he's famous for is based off of when Lord Chaitanya was young. He taught grammar, and after Lord Chaitanya met his guru, everything he taught would be based on Krishna's name or Krishna's pastimes. So when Lord Chaitanya was teaching grammar, he was teaching the rules of grammar, but all in relation to Krishna's names and Krishna's pastimes. And so Srila Jiva Goswami, because of what Lord Chaitanya did there, he wrote this book. It's called Harinam Amrita Vyakarana, and it teaches grammar based on Krishna's pastimes. Right, so one can learn Sanskrit grammar and all the rules, instead of learning it in some way, just memorizing rules or like that. You're actually learning about Krishna while learning grammar. So that's one of the books. He also gave a commentary on Srimad Bhagavatam, which expanded on Srila Sanatana Goswami's commentary, which is also a very important one. And there's so many really important ones. Gopal Champu. But one of the sets of books that I appreciate most, at least, is the Sat Sandarbhas. So there's 6 Sandarbhas, and they go through different topics that we as aspiring transcendentalists we need to understand. And so he divides them into 6 sections, and basically he explains these things while giving references from Srimad Bhagavatam verses. So the first one is Tattva Sandarbha, the first of the 6, and that has 2 divisions. So it's Praman and Prameya, right? So first is the different types of proof, right? And then what that proof is meant to what that proof is meant to make us realize. So what are the proper proofs? And that's the descending knowledge, right? And the object of understanding these things, Sri Krishna. So the Tattva Sandarbha does that. So it gives all these references from Srimad Bhagavatam on how we are to understand the Lord, and through these various different proofs, and who we should actually be understanding, which is Krishna. Then the Bhagavat Sandarbha talks about the Supreme Lord and his abode and his associates. So you get further understanding of that. Paramatma Sandarbha talks about the different super soul manifestations of the Lord. Again, it's all based on verses from Srimad Bhagavatam, and then he'll give elaborations based on those verses. And then Krishna Sandarbha, of course, he's talking about Sri Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and why he is the object of loving service. And in the Bhakti Sandarbha, Jiva Goswami gives the path of devotion as the sole means to God realization. So there's no other way to actually understand Krishna than through bhakti. And he, again, supports all of that with statements from Srimad Bhagavatam. And then Priti Sandarbha is an analysis of prema bhakti, so pure devotional service. So it basically goes from a basic understanding all the way up to the highest understanding, all based on verses from Srimad Bhagavatam. So we owe a lot to Srila Jiva Goswami for giving us all of these valuable tools that that we can use to get from whatever state of spirituality we're at right now. We can go through these books and understand better and better and better until we actually get to understanding prema bhakti, the ultimate goal. So from the very lowest level of realization of, how do I even understand, or how can I logically understand or explain to someone, what is actually the truth? How can I determine between, what I perceive and what is actually truth? From the Tattva Sandarbha all the way up to the Priti Sandarbha, actually understanding the intricacies of pure love of Godhead. These books with reference to Srimad Bhagavatam help us get through those various stages. So I'll stop here, and I'm sorry I went long, and these are topics that we can talk about. These, just Lord Vamana Dev and Srila Jiva Goswami, just small parts of their pastimes are enough to talk about for months, right? There's so many lessons that we can learn, and there's so many valuable resources that are given to us by these devotees. So we just barely scratched the surface. So I encourage everyone to, whenever they have the time, to look further into both of these, this pastime of Lord Vamana Dev and the works of Srila Jiva Goswami. But today especially, try to, if you have time, try to look further into these. And hopefully with that little scratch of the surface, some of you have become inspired to look further into these things. And because all of these things can be implemented into our lives and make us better devotees. And that's what this is all meant for. So I'll stop here and see if there are any questions or comments or appreciations for either Lord Vamana Dev or Srila Jiva Goswami. And again, I apologize for taking so much of the time today. Anyone?
Hare Krishna, Prabhu.
Hare Krishna.
Can we find these books in the book trust?
The Sandarbhas were translated by Banu Swami. I'm not sure. They're available online, I think. I don't know. I know they're. I don't have a great answer for you on that one. They're available online for sure. I imagine there are physical copies because Banu Swami generally does, but I don't know for sure. I got the file from him because we use it in our curriculum. So I don't know. I should know that, but I don't. I'm sorry.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the class. Hare Krishna.
All right.
Haribol Prabhu, about these books, I know in Vrindavan there's a store there that sell all the books of all the acharyas, bona fide, like from ISKCON.
Okay.
Translated.
Yeah, in India it's pretty easy to get your hands on these.
Yeah, but they sell in wholesale, and yeah, the website also.
Yeah.
I can.
Okay, so so you could probably get them online as well. Okay, that's good.
There's
Thank
a
you for
website where you can order.
I should have known that because I'm telling people to read them, and I should have known how they could read them. So thank you for that.
Okay.
Otherwise, if for some reason you can't get your hands on them, you could send me an email message. I could send you the files.
Yeah, I can send. I can send it to.
Right, or Mataji.
To Shubarade or something. And then she can forward it to the devotees, the website in India where they can order all the books they wanted, all the books by the Goswamis and all the acharyas.
Good. Thank you. Anything else?
Hare Krishna Prabhu, Dandavat Pranam.
Hare Krishna.
All glories to Srila Prabhu. Prabhu, today is the Vamana Dev appearance day. Then
You still there? I don't know if I got cut off or you did, Mataji, but I can't hear you anymore.
She's telling is today is a Vamana Dev appearance day.
Yes.
and we are observing the fasting also until 12 o'clock or something.
So
Actually, we
Gener-
fast. You're supposed to fast yesterday.
Okay.
Half day.
so because it's Dvadasi,
Ekadasi.
you have to break Ekadashi
Yeah.
the next morning. So generally,
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Yesterday I did fasting, but there is my calendar says also today, like I don't know, today also fasting.
Yeah, on occasion there are certain occasions where the fasting has to be observed on a different day. So the ones that happen on Dvadasi, because after fasting for Ekadashi, you have to break in a specific window of time, and so if you're doing a half a day fast the next day, you can't hit that window. So then the fasting then happens the previous day. So it's fasting for Ekadashi, but then you also don't have breakfast. Some people just fast anyway from everything on Ekadashi. So for them, it's no different. But for others who are just, doing the bean and grain fast, then they would also not eat before noon. There are different situations for Ekadashis and breaking fast. But that's for this one, that's how that one works.
Can you repeat the reference for the grammar book that you mentioned in the beginning of your list of books, please?
Yes, the grammar
third
book
one.
is called Harinamamrita Vyakarana. So Srila Prabhupada actually mentions in the introduction to Srimad Bhagavatam, Srila Prabhupada is talking a lot about Lord Chaitanya and his life. And in that bit, when he's talking about Lord Chaitanya when he was 16 years old, he started his own school. And then Srila Jiva Goswami, in order to please Lord Chaitanya, composed this grammar book. And then it's also mentioned elsewhere in Vedabase, but it's Harinamamrita Vyakarana.
Thank you.
Sure.
Pal Champu also?
Gopal Champu, yes, he also wrote that. So many books. There's a list. It's given in Chaitanya Charitamrita, in Antya Leela. I think there's a whole list of books that Srila Jiva Goswami gave. So I just wanted to mention they're all important. So, and then different ones are important to different people. But for us, especially his commentary on Srimad Bhagavatam and the Satsandarbha, because as I mentioned, it gets us from whatever our level of understanding is currently. It'll gradually bring us through explanation from Srimad Bhagavatam to the point where we actually understand Prema Bhakti. So even if we're just a neophyte and we don't even understand, how one accepts something or proves something, we don't have that logic yet to understand it, to distinguish the difference between what's real and what's illusion, right? And that's what the Srimad Bhagavatam is meant for. The highest truth is reality distinguished from illusion for the benefit of all, right? And the Srimad Bhagavatam propounds this highest truth. So from the point where we're not even at that point where we can distinguish reality from truth, in the Tattva Sandarbha explains all of that, all the way up through the point in all these different levels of understanding until we actually understand the highest platform of Prema Bhakti. And it's all being supported and proved through one book, the Srimad Bhagavatam, but it's just from different themes. So there's a thematic study of Srimad Bhagavatam. So from the lowest level of not even understanding what to accept and how to accept it, distinguishing reality from illusion, to the point of actually understanding the intricacies of Prema Bhakti. That's what those books will get us. And then so books like Gopal Champu, if we're not on a higher level of understanding, we're not really going to be able to fully appreciate, because they're about more intimate pastimes that happen in Vrindavan. But these books, and then also the Harinamamrita Vyakarana, if we're actually interested in learning Sanskrit grammar, this is the best way to do it, because while we're doing it, we're also glorifying Krishna's names, right? But not everybody, it's kind of rare that people want to learn Sanskrit, but if you do, then you do it with this particular method, as Lord Chaitanya taught, and then as Srila Jiva Goswami I guess he expanded the field by putting it in this book that people can follow. So Srila Prabhupada mentions that that book is actually on the syllabus in schools in Bengal. So if you're in Bengal and you want to learn Sanskrit, at least some time ago, that's the book that was used. I don't know if it's probably in some schools it's obviously still used, but I don't know if it's still commonly used in all of these schools. But anything else?
Hare Krishna Prabhu. I wanted to ask something about when Boli Maharaj, Vamana they take everything from him, and then Vamana Dev gave him the Patalluka. He made him king of Patalluka, Prabhu.
Was it Sutala?
Sutala. Then like Bhagavad Gita said, like Urdhvam
You're cutting in and out.
Then Prabhu, I don't understand like why he go to the Sutaluka,
Oh, it's mentioned that because it's actually better. It's better for the demons. So demons means just the sons of Diti. It doesn't mean that they're always demonic. We have examples of Prahlad Maharaj, right? Which is Bali Maharaj's grandfather, who are very much devoted to Lord Vishnu. But as a species or as a family, the demons tend to they're pious, but they don't necessarily give much attention to Lord Vishnu. In other words, they follow the culture, but they don't do it so that they can attain service to Lord Vishnu in general, not always. Obviously, like we said, there are exceptions. So the subterranean heavenly planets are actually, in one sense, better than the heavenly planets, in the sense that in the heavenly planets, the Kala Chakra is visible, right? We see the sun going. So we understand that time is passing, which always reminds us that death is going to come, right? This is Krishna's way of showing us that, okay, time is going, so you shouldn't waste your time and you should, properly get, which is actually an advantage for a devotee. We should always be, or for an aspiring devotee, that we should always be reminded that our time is limited. In the subterranean heavenly planets, the enjoyment is better because there's no constant reminder that death will come. They don't see the sun and going. They don't understand that time is passing. They're just enjoying. So it's less stressful. It's more material enjoyment. So in that sense, it's better. So it suits the demons because they don't want to be reminded of Krishna, right? But the devotees, they do. Pardon me. Oh. The devotees do want to be reminded of Krishna. So that's why they see Kala Chakra. So materially speaking, the subterranean heavenly planets, they're more enjoyment and less stress. So those who that's what their tendency is, that's where they want to be. So it's not that that Prahlad Maharaj and Bali Maharaj fit that category of not wanting to see Vishnu, but their subjects, those who they're governing over, that's not their main priority. So they just want to do what they're doing. So so they can remember Lord Vishnu there, Prahlad Maharaj and Bali Maharaj. Lord Vishnu is actually there. He's the doorman of Bali Maharaj. He stands on the door and gives protection to Bali Maharaj, right? So he's there. But as far as everyone else is concerned, they're not paying attention. The subterranean heavenly planets, I usually compare them to a casino. Casinos don't have windows, they don't have clocks. They just want you to enjoy there. They want you to gamble as much as possible and drink as much as possible and enjoy as much as possible, because then you're going to be inclined to try to gamble more. And this is what the subterranean heavenly planets are like. You have no concept of time. You're just focused on trying to enjoy as much as possible. And so that's why he's then given that area. So he's able to still reap the benefit of pleasing Lord Vishnu, and he still has focus on Lord Vishnu, but his followers, they're engaged in other things. So they're able to work off their enjoyment in a very specific way that they've earned it, right? So it's still piety, but it's piety in the, we'd say, the negative sense, the dark sense. It's light piety and dark piety. Does that make sense? You're muted, but hopefully that explains. Is there anything else?
Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Okay, so we've gone over again. Sorry. So Srila Vamana Dev ki jai, Srila Jiva Goswami ki jai, Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada. Ki jai. Thank you all very much. Panchakalpatrubhyas Chakrapas and Dubhyevatam All right.
Thank you very much, Prabhu.